Come closer, my child. Do not rush your steps right now. Let the noise fall behind you. I am not speaking from the storm, but from the stillness beneath it. I know you have been searching for direction, questioning your own reflection, wondering how you arrived at this place where everything feels unfamiliar. You have asked yourself if something is wrong with you because you no longer recognize the path you are on. Listen to me carefully. There is nothing broken in you. There is nothing defective in your spirit. What you are feeling is not failure. It is the moment before remembering who you truly are. I see you standing in what feels like an in-between place. Not who you were, but not yet who you are becoming. This space feels uncomfortable because it does not allow you to perform, pretend, or hide behind old identities. It strips you of labels that once made you feel safe. That is why it feels like being lost. But I did not bring you here to abandon you. I brought you here to speak to you without distraction. You have been trying to measure yourself against timelines that were never assigned to you. You look around and wonder why others seem to move forward while you feel suspended, paused, unsure. But my child, what looks like stillness to the world is preparation in the unseen. I am quieting the voices that shaped you but never knew you. I am loosening your grip on roles you outgrew but kept carrying out of fear. Feeling lost is not the sign of absence. It is the sign that you have stopped settling for what no longer fits your soul. I know there are moments when you wake up and your heart feels heavy without explanation. You try to name what is missing, but the words do not come. You replay decisions, conversations, paths not taken. You wonder if you waited too long or moved too soon. You ask me in whispers if you misunderstood me somewhere along the way. Hear me now. I have not changed my mind about you. I have not withdrawn my hand. I'm closer now than I was when everything felt clear. This wilderness you are in is not punishment. It is privacy. I have pulled you aside because the next version of you cannot be formed in the noise of approval or the pressure of expectation. Here, you are learning to listen again. Here, you are learning to sit with questions without condemning yourself for not having answers. Here, your spirit is stretching, even when your mind feels tired. If these words are meeting you exactly where you are, let it be known in the quiet ways. Gently press like, share this with someone who feels unseen, and subscribe so you do not walk this path alone. And if you feel led, type in the comments, I am not lost, I am becoming, as a seed of truth planted in your own heart. My child, you have mistaken transition for regression. You thought because the old map no longer worked, you had failed. But maps are only useful for places already discovered. I am leading you into territory where you must trust my voice more than your certainty. That is why I allowed the familiar to dissolve. That is why answers did not come when you demanded them. I am teaching you to walk by presence, not by prediction. Notice how you are more sensitive now. How certain environments drain you faster. How shallow conversations feel louder than they used to. This is not weakness. This is refinement. You are becoming aware of what your spirit can no longer tolerate. Lost people numb themselves. Becoming people feel everything. That is why this season feels so intense. I know you are tired of explaining yourself. Tired of being asked what you are doing next when you barely understand what is happening now. I know you have smiled through uncertainty so others would not worry. But you do not need to perform for me. Stay here. Breathe. Let me carry the weight you keep trying to justify. You are not behind. You are not late. You are not failing life. You are shedding a skin that could not go where I am taking you. This discomfort is the evidence that growth is happening in places you cannot yet see. The ache you feel is not emptiness. is expansion. Stay with me here. Do not rush to escape this season. There are truths waiting to be revealed, connections aligning quietly, and parts of you waking up that could not surface in busyness. This is the beginning, not the end. And I promise you, clarity will come. But first, I needed you still enough to hear me call you by your true name. There was a moment, my child, when everything you thought was stable began to loosen at once. Not gradually, not gently. It felt sudden, like the ground shifted without warning. What once made sense no longer held its shape. The plans you trusted started dissolving in your hands. Conversations changed tone. Doors you expected to open stayed closed. And inside you, something quietly said, "This is not working anymore," even though you could not explain why. You remember that moment. It did not arrive with drama. It came in the ordinary. A day that looked like every other day, yet something inside you cracked open. You felt it when motivation slipped away from things you once loved. You felt it when you tried to push forward out of discipline, but your spirit resisted. You told yourself to try harder, to be grateful, to stay positive. But effort could not fix what was no longer aligned. This was the moment you later described as everything falling apart. But listen to me. Nothing fell apart by accident. What collapsed did so because it could not carry you into what comes next. I allowed the structures that depended on old versions of you to weaken. I let certainty fade so truth could surface. I let comfort dissolve so calling could rise. You thought you were losing direction, but what you were losing was illusion. The illusion that you could keep becoming without changing. The illusion that safety meant staying the same. The illusion that clarity always comes before obedience. That season ended because it had completed its assignment. And you felt the ending as loss because you had not yet seen what was replacing it. I watched you try to hold things together out of loyalty. Loyalty to people who once understood you. Loyalty to dreams you prayed for years ago. Loyalty to a version of yourself that survived so much. I honor that loyalty. But there comes a time when holding on becomes disobedience to growth. And that is where you stood, exhausted, confused, quietly unraveling. You questioned yourself deeply then. You wondered if you were being ungrateful. You asked if your restlessness meant you lacked discipline or faith. You replayed the past, searching for the exact decision where things went wrong. But the truth is, nothing went wrong. You simply reached the edge of who you could be without transformation. That breaking moment was not chaos. It was timing. I placed a divine timestamp on that unraveling. I knew exactly when the familiar needed to lose its power over you. I knew exactly when the answers had to stop coming so you would stop asking the wrong questions. You kept asking, "How do I fix this?" when the real question was, "Who am I becoming now?" It felt like abandonment because you were used to my guidance arriving as clarity. But this time, I came as invitation. Instead of telling you where to go, I asked you to trust me where you stood. Instead of giving you a map, I give you hunger. Hunger for truth. Hunger for depth. Hunger for alignment that no longer tolerates pretending. I know the fear that crept in during that season. The quiet panic when you realized you could not go back, but could not yet see forward. The shame you felt when you compared your inner chaos to others' outward certainty. You wondered if everyone else received instructions you somehow missed. But my child, I do not lead all my children the same way. Some I guide with signs. Others I guide by stripping everything that is not them. What you experienced was a holy interruption. I interrupted momentum so meaning could catch up. I interrupted noise so your soul could speak. I interrupted expectations so destiny could breathe. That is why it hurt. Interruptions always feel violent to the ego, but gentle to the spirit. Notice this now. The things that fell apart did not take you with them. You remained. Even in confusion, you remained. Even in grief for the old life, you remained. That is because I was not dismantling you. I was preserving you. I was separating your identity from your attachments. This is why, even at your lowest, something in you stayed alive. A quiet knowing. A flicker of hope you could not explain. That was me. I was there in the silence after plans failed. I was there in the empty space where certainty used to live. I was there when you stared at the ceiling asking what now. That moment everything fell apart was not the end of your story. It was the moment the story stopped being written by expectation and started being written by truth. And though it felt like collapse, it was actually alignment beginning its work. Stay with me. What was exposed there will soon make sense. There is someone connected to you, my child, even if distance, silence, or misunderstanding has tried to convince you otherwise. While you were questioning your own direction, they were doing the same in the quiet places of their heart. Their struggle did not look like yours on the surface, but beneath it, the ache was familiar. I felt unsteady, an anchor, as if something essential was missing, yet they could not name what it was. They carried their confusion differently. Where you turned inward, they tried to keep moving. Where you allowed yourself to feel the weight of uncertainty, they distracted themselves from it. But at night, when the world went still, their thoughts found you. Not always consciously. Sometimes as a feeling. Sometimes as a memory that surfaced without permission. Sometimes as a heaviness they could not explain. This is where the connection deepens. Your disorientation and theirs were not separate events. They were echoes. When your spirit began shedding what no longer fit, theirs felt the tremor. When you stepped into the unknown, they felt the safety of the familiar lose its grip. That is why they grew restless. That is why things in their life started feeling hollow, even if they looked successful from the outside. I watched them wrestle with emotions they did not want to admit. Fear of being seen. Fear of being left behind. Fear that if they stopped long enough to listen, they would have to confront how much they cared and how unprepared they felt to meet you where you were becoming. They told themselves stories to stay comfortable. They minimized their longing. They postponed conversations with themselves that felt too dangerous to have. There were moments when guilt washed over them unexpectedly. Not because they had done something obvious, but because they sensed something sacred shifting, and they did not know how to respond. They wondered why your absence, your distance, or your change affected them so deeply. They asked themselves why they felt unsteady when you were the one who seemed lost. What they did not realize was that your courage to sit in uncertainty was stirring their avoidance. They felt the collapse too, just in different ways. A relationship that no longer fulfilled them. A routine that suddenly felt meaningless. A success that tasted empty. And instead of slowing down, they pushed harder, hoping motion would quiet the voice inside. But confusion only grows louder when ignored. I know they questioned themselves. They wondered if they were imagining the pull they felt toward you. They told themselves it was timing, circumstance, practicality. Anything but truth. Because truth would require vulnerability, and vulnerability would require change. And change terrified them, especially while you were already walking through transformation. In their private moments, they felt small, smaller than they wanted anyone to see. They felt behind, even if no one else noticed. They felt afraid that if they reached for you, they would expose how lost they were. So they stayed silent, or distant, or inconsistent. Not because they did not care, but because they did not yet know how to stand steady in their own becoming. Do not mistake their confusion for indifference. Do not confuse their hesitation with lack of feeling. They are in an emotional collapse of their own, one they barely allow themselves to acknowledge. And just as you questioned whether something was wrong with you, they wondered the same about themselves. Two hearts, both in transition, both afraid of misreading the moment. I was present with them too, just as I am with you. I whispered in ways they could hear, even if they did not yet understand. I allowed things to shake in their life not to punish them, but to wake them. I let them feel the cost of avoidance. I let the noise fade so the truth could rise. There were nights they sat alone, scrolling, pacing, replaying conversations with you in their mind, wondering if they should reach out, wondering if it was too late, wondering if they would disrupt something sacred by speaking, or lose something sacred by staying silent. The tension you felt in the air between you was real. It was the sound of two souls being pulled toward growth from different directions. My child, your lost season was never meant to be walked alone, even if it felt that way. A soulmate struggle is not a distraction from your path. It is part of the mirror. Through your courage to face the unknown, something in them is being stirred awake. And through their fear, you are learning patience, discernment, and trust in my timing. Do not rush to interpret their silence. Do not assume their confusion means disconnection. Sometimes awakening looks like withdrawal before it looks like pursuit. Sometimes realization comes only after the collapse is fully felt. I am working in both stories at once, weaving threads you cannot yet see. Stay grounded in your own becoming. Let me handle their awakening. What is aligned will not miss its moment. What is real will survive the wilderness. And when clarity begins to rise in them, it will be because the lost season did its sacred work in you first. While you were breaking, my child, there were things happening that you could not see from where you stood. Pain narrows vision. Confusion blurs perspective. When you are inside the unraveling, it feels like everything is being taken from you at once. But I was not subtracting without purpose. I was rearranging in ways that required privacy, timing, and trust. There were doors I closed quietly before they could wound you later. There were conversations I delayed because you were not yet ready to hear what they would reveal. There were attachments I loosened because they were shaping you through fear instead of truth. You thought you were losing ground, but I was clearing it. You thought you were being stripped, but I was making room. I know how deeply you questioned yourself in that season. You asked why things that once felt blessed suddenly felt heavy. You wondered why your spirit resisted paths you prayed for years ago. What you could not see was that those prayers had been answered, just not in the way your mind expected. I answered by evolving you beyond what you asked for. And when growth outpaces environment, tension is inevitable. There were lessons that could not be learned through success. There were truths that could not surface while you were comfortable. So I allowed discomfort to become your teacher. Not to harm you, but to awaken you. I let silence stretch so you could hear your own soul again. I let delays frustrate you so you would stop rushing into misaligned yeses. While you were grieving the old version of your life, I was protecting the new one from being formed too soon. Premature exposure would have made you shrink back into what was familiar. So I hid the becoming. I worked underground. I shaped you in ways that did not announce themselves. That is why it felt like nothing was happening, even though everything was. There were moments you felt alone, but you were never unguarded. I placed distance between you and certain people not because they were evil, but because proximity would have confused your discernment. Some connections were meant to end. Others were meant to pause. And a few were meant to transform, but only after you transform first. You could not see the protection because it looked like loss. You could not see the formation because it felt like emptiness. But I was teaching you discernment by contrast, teaching you peace by removing noise, teaching you self-trust by letting external validation fall silent. I needed you to know who you were without applause, without reassurance, without constant confirmation. There were patterns breaking in you that had survived for years. Patterns of overgiving, of self-abandonment disguised as loyalty, of staying quiet to keep peace. These patterns did not break easily. They resisted. They made noise. They made you doubt yourself. But they could not follow you where you are going. So they had to be confronted, even if the confrontation felt like collapse. I know you wondered why clarity did not come faster, why answers arrived in fragments instead of fullness. But if I had shown you everything at once, you would have clung to understanding instead of leaning into trust. I was teaching you to move with me without needing certainty, to rest without knowing outcomes, to believe without proof. There were moments when you thought you were regressing, when old fears resurfaced and old wounds ached again. But healing is not linear. Sometimes wounds speak one last time before they lose their voice. Sometimes fear rises when it senses it is about to lose control. That does not mean you failed. It means something is being uprooted. Even your exhaustion had purpose. It forced you to slow down, to stop performing strength, to admit vulnerability. In your weariness, you stopped pretending you had it all together. And in that honesty, I could finally meet you where you were, not where you thought you needed to be. There were connections forming quietly while others faded loudly. There were opportunities being aligned that required you to no longer be who you were. That is why the old could not stay. It would have limited what was coming. I know it felt unfair. I know it felt sudden. But timing is rarely gentle when transformation is real. What you could not see was how much of you was being preserved. Your softness, your integrity, your ability to feel deeply in a world that numbs itself. I guarded those things fiercely. I let what threatened them fall away, even if you mourned the loss. I chose your future over your comfort, because love does that. One day, you will look back at this season with different eyes. You will see the patterns you escaped without realizing it, the harm you avoided, the growth you did not rush. You will understand why clarity waited until character caught up, why connection waited until boundaries were formed, why destiny waited until you trusted yourself again. For now, trust this: nothing was wasted, nothing was random. Nothing was wrong with you while you were breaking. You were being reintroduced to yourself in truth. And what is forming in you now could only have been shaped in the dark, in the quiet, in the season you thought was undoing you. Stay with me. There is more to reveal. There was a voice, my child, that did not want you to grow beyond what was convenient. It did not always sound cruel. Sometimes it sounded familiar. Sometimes it sounded reasonable. Sometimes it even sounded like concern. But beneath it lived jealousy, fear, and the need to keep you predictable. That voice grew louder the moment you began to change. It questioned your instincts. It downplayed your intuition. It reminded you of who you used to be whenever you tried to step into who you were becoming. It said you were asking for too much, feeling too deeply, wanting too much meaning from life. And because this voice came from someone close or from patterns formed long ago, it carried weight. You listened longer than you should have. I saw how it planted doubt quietly, not by attacking you directly, but by making you second-guess your own knowing. It made you feel dramatic for honoring your emotions, ungrateful for wanting alignment, naive for believing there was more. Over time, you began to shrink certain parts of yourself to avoid conflict, misunderstanding, or judgment. You called it being mature, but it was self-betrayal disguised as peacekeeping. This voice benefited from you staying small, from you staying accessible without boundaries, from you being available without being fulfilled. Your expansion threatened its control, its comfort, its narrative. So it tried to convince you that your confusion meant incompetence, that your restlessness meant instability, that your longing meant immaturity. None of that was true. There were moments when you felt guilt simply for outgrowing the space you were in. You wondered why you could not just be content like before. You questioned why the same routines, the same conversations, the same expectations now felt suffocating. And that voice was ready with an answer. It told you something was wrong with you. It told you to try harder to fit back in. But listen to me now. Growth always threatens systems built on stagnation. Awakening exposes dynamics that rely on silence. Your discomfort was not rebellion. It was discernment. You were sensing that staying the same would cost you more than leaving ever could. This interference was not always intentional. Sometimes jealousy wears the mask of familiarity. Sometimes manipulation is unconscious. But the effect was the same. It blurred your vision at a time when clarity was essential. It made you doubt your timing. It made you question your worth. It made you hesitate at doors I was opening. I allowed you to feel the tension long enough to recognize it. I did not remove the voice immediately because you needed to see how it operated. You needed to feel the difference between conviction and control, between guidance and guilt, between love that frees and attachment that confines. Discernment is not learned in theory. It is learned in experience. You noticed how drained you felt after certain interactions, how heavy your chest became after certain conversations, how you felt smaller after explaining your dreams. That was your spirit signaling misalignment. I was teaching you to trust those signals again, after years of overriding them to keep harmony. The enemy rarely announces itself as an enemy. He often arrives as discouragement that feels practical, as advice that sounds wise but dims your light, as familiarity that resists change. And when you began to pull away, that voice accused you of abandoning, of changing too much, of thinking you were better than others. But separation is not superiority. It is obedience to growth. I know it hurt to realize that not everyone could celebrate your becoming. I know it stung to see support fade just as courage rose. But understand this. Those who benefit from your old self will always resist your new one. That resistance does not define your value. It reveals their limits. This was not about cutting people off. It was about cutting cords of influence that distorted your self-perception. It was about reclaiming your inner authority. I was teaching you that not every voice deserves access to your becoming. A discernment is not judgment. It is stewardship of your soul. As you stepped back, clarity began to return. The fog lifted slowly but steadily. You started recognizing when doubt was planted, not intuitive. When fear was external, not your own. When guilt was learned, not earned. And in that awareness, power returned to you. You are not cold for creating distance. You are not selfish for choosing alignment. You are not wrong for no longer resonating with what once felt normal. You are responding to truth rising within you. And truth always disrupts what depends on distortion. Let this be settled in you. Anyone who needs you to stay lost so they can feel secure was never meant to guide you forward. I am separating voices now, strengthening discernment, restoring confidence. What tried to keep you small no longer has access. Stay grounded. The interference has been exposed. And once something is seen clearly, it cannot control you the way it once did. From the moment things began to unravel, heaven did not look away. While you felt uncertain, watched by doubt and fear, I was watching with intention. Every sigh you released in private, every tear you wiped away before anyone noticed, every question you whispered into the silence, none of it went unseen. None of it went unrecorded. This was not a season of neglect. It was a season of close observation. I was examining not only what happened to you, but how it shaped you. I was weighing motives, patterns, influences, and timing. I was allowing certain pressures to reveal what was authentic and what was performative. Truth always emerges under strain. And in your strain, something beautiful became clear. Your heart remained soft. Your integrity remained intact. Your desire for truth never dimmed, even when certainty did. You thought delays meant indifference. But delays were protection, while I investigated the terrain ahead. There were paths that looked promising but would have required you to abandon yourself. There were connections that seemed aligned but carried hidden conditions. I did not rush you forward because I was guarding you from what you could not yet discern clearly. While you questioned your worth, I was assessing how much weight you could carry without losing yourself. While you wondered if you were behind, I was rearranging sequences so you would not arrive too early or too exposed. Timing is not about speed. It is about readiness. And readiness is measured in wisdom, not ambition. There were unseen exchanges happening on your behalf. Conversations you never heard. Outcomes you were spared from. Conflicts redirected away from you. I stood between you and things that would have shattered your trust at a vulnerable time. You only saw the surface of what was happening. But beneath it, justice was active. I was also revealing truths about those around you. Not to create bitterness, but clarity. I let patterns repeat so you could see them without excuse. I allowed silence to speak louder than promises. I allowed inconsistency to expose itself. This was not punishment for anyone. It was illumination. And illumination is mercy. You were learning discernment not by being told, but by experiencing contrast. The difference between words and actions, between intention and impact, between love that supports and attachment that drains. These distinctions are not learned quickly. They require patience, observation, and often disappointment. I know how hard it was to wait without explanation, to sit in the unknown without reassurance, to feel exposed without clarity. But this waiting refined your faith. It taught you to trust my character instead of my convenience, to believe in my presence even when my hand was not obvious. There were moments when you wanted me to intervene loudly, to fix, confront, or clarify. But loud interventions would have short-circuited the lessons unfolding. I needed you to see truth for yourself, to feel it in your spirit, to recognize alignment without being convinced. The kind of knowing stays with you. Justice does not always arrive as confrontation. Sometimes it arrives as removal. Sometimes it arrives as delay. Sometimes it arrives as revelation. And in your life, justice came quietly, strategically, and thoroughly. I was closing doors that would have drained you. I was loosening ties that would have confused you. I was shielding you from outcomes you were not meant to endure. You were not being tested to fail. You were being examined to advance. I was ensuring that what comes next would not repeat what came before, that patterns would not recycle, that wounds would not masquerade as destiny. This required careful observation and precise timing. Even now, you may not see the full scope of what was prevented, but one day, clarity will reveal how much harm you bypassed, how many wrong turns were avoided, how many burdens were never placed on your shoulders, and you will realize that what felt like being held back was actually being held. Your faith during this season mattered. Not the loud kind, the quiet kind, the kind that kept breathing even when answers were delayed, the kind that stayed open even when trust felt risky. That faith was noted, it was honored, and it shaped what comes next. Understand this, my child. Heaven has been attentive. Nothing about your journey has been overlooked. Justice has been active even when you felt invisible. And because of that, the next shift will not be random. It will be precise. It will be fair. It will be aligned. Stay patient. The investigation is yielding clarity, and clarity will soon turn into movement that feels clean, grounded, and unmistakably right. There came a moment when something changed, even though nothing around you looked different. You felt it quietly, a loosening, a subtle release of pressure you had grown used to carrying. The questions did not vanish, but they no longer screamed. The weight did not disappear, but it shifted, as if it no longer sat directly on your chest. This was the beginning of the turn, the shift you could sense but not yet explain. You may have tried to dismiss it, told yourself not to get hopeful too soon. But your spirit noticed. You started breathing a little deeper, sleeping a little more peacefully, responding instead of reacting. The chaos that once pulled at you lost some of its grip. That was not coincidence. That was alignment beginning to assert itself. I was adjusting things in the unseen. Not dramatically, gently, precisely. I was recalibrating your inner compass so it would point toward truth instead of urgency. That is why the shift did not arrive as a solution. You arrived as steadiness. Clarity often begins as calm before it becomes understanding. You began to feel less responsible for fixing everything, less compelled to explain yourself, less anxious about being misunderstood. That is not apathy. That is discernment strengthening. When your inner world aligns, external chaos loses its authority. Here were signs you always missed. Synchronicities that felt too exact to be random. Conversations that arrived at the right moment. Words that echoed prayers you never spoke out loud. These were confirmations, not commands. I was reminding you that you are not wandering alone. You also felt resistance fading. Things that once triggered panic now felt manageable. Decisions that once felt overwhelming became clearer. This did not mean the path was fully revealed. It meant your nervous system was learning safety again. And safety is essential for discernment. This shift required you to let go of the need to rush toward certainty, to release the urgency to label everything immediately, to trust that clarity unfolds when the heart is steady. You stopped forcing answers. You allowed yourself to be present. And in that presence, wisdom began to surface naturally. I know you worried that this calm meant you were settling. But peace is not resignation. It is alignment. When you are aligned, you no longer chase what is not meant for you. You no longer argue with reality. You listen. You observe. You respond from grounded truth instead of fear. You may have noticed that some desires softened while others became clearer. This is not loss. This is refinement. I was separating what was fueled by ego from what was rooted in soul. And what is soul-rooted does not scream for attention. It waits with confidence. A shift also brought a quiet mourning for what no longer calls you, for dreams that belong to an earlier version of you, for identities you wore to survive. This grief is sacred. It honors the journey without chaining you to it. Let it pass through you without judgment. Your body felt the change too. Less tension, different fatigue, a need for rest rather than escape. Listen to that. Your body is catching up to the spiritual realignment. It needs gentleness, not pressure. I was also preparing you for truth. Clarity requires capacity. If it arrives before the heart is ready, it wounds instead of heals. That is why the shift came as stabilization first. So when truth rises, it will not destabilize you. It will ground you. Do not underestimate this phase. It is not dramatic, but it is decisive. Many people turn back right here because the absence of chaos feels unfamiliar. But you stayed. You trusted the quiet. And because of that, what comes next will not feel forced. This shift is the hint between confusion and understanding, between survival and intention, between being lost and being led. You do not need to rush it. Let it complete its work. The clarity you seek is forming on the other side of this calm. Stay present. Stay open. What you sensed was real. Alignment has begun. Where confusion once ruled your thoughts, truth is beginning to rise, slowly but unmistakably. Not as a sudden revelation, but as a steady light that no longer flickers when questioned. You are starting to see yourself without distortion. The harsh inner dialogue that once dominated your mind is losing credibility. You are no longer accepting every accusation as fact. And that, my child, is the beginning of freedom. You blamed yourself for too long. You assumed that if something felt difficult, it must be because you were lacking. If something ended, it must have been because you were not enough. If clarity delayed, it must have meant you failed to listen. But truth is dismantling those assumptions one by one. You are realizing that many of the things you internalized were never yours to carry. Memories are resurfacing now, but they feel different. Situations you once replayed with shame are revealing new layers. You are seeing where you showed up with honesty, where you tried, where you loved sincerely, where you were patient beyond what was required. And instead of self-judgment, compassion is taking root. You are no longer rewriting the past to punish yourself. You are allowing it to teach you. The lies that once had power over you are cracking. The lie that you were too much. The lie that you were difficult to love. The lie that your sensitivity was a flaw. These narratives thrived in confusion. But clarity does not tolerate distortion. The truth rises, those voices lose their authority. They cannot survive scrutiny. You are also beginning to recognize patterns without excusing them. You see where others projected their fears onto you, where inconsistency was framed as complexity, where silence was framed as mystery. And instead of trying to make sense of what never made sense, you are allowing truth to stand on its own. You are no longer chasing explanations that cost you your peace. This clarity is not cold. It is gentle. It does not harden you. It softens you in the right places while strengthening your boundaries. You are learning that understanding does not require self-sacrifice. That empathy does not mean endurance without limits. That love does not ask you to disappear. There is relief in this stage, even if it feels unfamiliar. The constant mental noise is quieter. The urge to overanalyze has softened. You are trusting your initial knowing again. And when something does not feel right, you no longer argue yourself out of it. That is discernment maturing. Truth is also correcting your self-image. You are seeing how resilient you have been, how many times you adapted without losing your core, how often you chose integrity over ease. You are no longer minimizing your strength to make others comfortable. You are honoring it quietly, without needing validation. You may notice that conversations feel different now. You listen more than you explain. You observe more than you react. You are not trying to be understood by everyone. You are choosing resonance over recognition. This is not withdrawal. This is alignment. Some realizations sting. Truth is not always gentle in its arrival. There is grief in seeing clearly what you once hoped would change. There is disappointment in recognizing that some connections were built on potential, not reality. Let that grief move through you. It is not here to break you. It is here to release you. As truth rises, responsibility shifts. You are no longer responsible for carrying confusion that was never yours. You are no longer obligated to stay where clarity is unwelcome. You are no longer bound by narratives that required your silence to survive. Truth liberates, even when it costs something. You are also learning to trust peace as a compass, not the absence of challenge, but the presence of integrity. When something aligns, it does not require you to betray yourself. It does not ask you to shrink or rush. It feels grounded, even when it stretches you. Notice how your self-talk has changed, how you speak to yourself with more patience, how you allow rest without guilt, how you stop spiraling at the first sign of uncertainty. This is not complacency. This is confidence returning to its rightful place. You are not who you were in confusion. You are clear now, stronger, more discerning. And this clarity was earned, not given. It was shaped by questions, by waiting, by courage to sit with discomfort until truth revealed itself. Nothing about your lost season was wasted. It stripped away illusion so truth could breathe. And now that truth is rising, it is anchoring you. You are no longer searching for yourself. You are recognizing yourself. Stay here for a moment. Let clarity settle. Let truth take root. What comes next will require this foundation, and you are ready for it. Something is stirring in them now, my child. The one who once stood at a distance, unsure, hesitant, distracted by their own fear, is beginning to see clearly. What was once muted inside them is rising to the surface, demanding to be acknowledged. They are waking up to a truth they tried to delay, and the truth has your name written quietly through it. They are realizing what your presence meant while it was still available in its gentlest form. They are replaying moments they did not fully value at the time. Your patience, your understanding, the way you offered safety without asking for anything in return. What once felt guaranteed to them now feels fragile. And in that realization, fear has entered their heart. This awakening is not comfortable for them. It comes with regret, with self-questioning, with a sharp awareness that timing is not something they control. They are seeing how their confusion, silence, or inconsistency may have cost them something sacred. And for the first time, they are allowing themselves to feel that loss without numbing it. They are afraid now. Afraid that you have moved too far into yourself to turn back. Afraid that your clarity has closed a door they assumed would always remain open. They sense your strength differently. Where they once felt secure in your availability, they now feel your independence. And it unsettles them, not because they want control, but because they recognize what they risk losing. In quiet moments, their heart races with questions they avoided before. What if I waited too long? What if I misunderstood them? What if my fear might miss what was meant for me? These questions do not come from ego. I come from awakening. From the sudden awareness that love requires presence, not convenience. They are noticing the contrast now. How life feels emptier without your energy woven into it. How conversations lack depth. How achievements feel hollow without someone who truly sees them. You were a mirror they were not ready to face. And now that mirror is no longer right in front of them, they feel the absence deeply. This fear is not meant to punish them. It is meant to mature them. To teach them that connection is not passive. That love does not wait indefinitely for courage to arrive. They are being confronted with their own hesitation, and it is humbling. You may feel this shift intuitively. A pull, a heaviness, a sudden awareness that they are thinking of you more intensely. Energy does not require proximity to move. Hearts recognize when something changes, and something has changed in them. They want to reach out. They rehearse words. They imagine conversations. But fear still lingers. Fear of rejection. Fear of disrupting your peace. Fear of facing the truth of where they stand. Awakening does not instantly create bravery. It creates awareness first, and awareness can be overwhelming. Do not let this awareness make you restless. You are not responsible for their timing. You are not meant to regress into uncertainty to soothe their fear. Your clarity is not cruelty. It is the result of growth. And if they are meant to meet you, they will have to rise to that clarity, not ask you to abandon it. I am working in their heart, just as I worked in yours. But the paths are different. The lessons arrive differently. What matters is that awakening has begun. And awakening always carries urgency, because it reveals what is at stake. Let them feel it. Let them wrestle with it. This fear is teaching them the value of what they almost lost. And whether this leads to reunion or release, it will not be wasted. Because awakening, once it begins, cannot be undone. You do not need to act. You do not need to explain. You only need to remain grounded in who you are becoming. What is aligned will move toward truth. What is not will fall away without your effort. Stay steady, my child. The awakening you sparked is real. And whatever comes next will be shaped by honesty, not fear. You were never as invisible as you thought, my child. Even in your quiet endurance, even when you felt overlooked or misunderstood, your presence was doing more than you realized. Your prayers, spoken or silent, your decision to stay soft in a season that tried to harden you, your choice to keep your heart open without chasing what was not aligned. All of it shifted things in ways you could not see. You thought you were waiting, but you were anchoring. While others moved frantically, you stayed. While confusion swirled, you remained faithful to truth. That steadiness became a stabilizing force, not just for you, but for the connection tied to your destiny. You did not need to convince. You did not need to pursue. Your being was enough. There were moments when you questioned the value of your prayers. You wondered if they were doing anything at all. You asked if your hope was misplaced, if your faith was naive. But prayer is not measured by immediate outcomes. It is measured by the way it alters timelines quietly. And yours did. Because you chose healing over bitterness, cycles were interrupted. Because you chose clarity over chaos, confusion lost its grip. Because you chose truth over attachment, space was created for awakening. These choices were not loud, but they were powerful. They adjusted outcomes. They softened hearts. They delayed harm. They preserved what could be redeemed. Your presence acted as a mirror. Without demanding change, it revealed it. Without forcing growth, it inspired it. Some people are assigned to teach through confrontation. Others teach through consistency. You were the latter. And consistency is harder to dismiss. You may not have seen immediate results, but seeds were planted. In conversations that lingered longer than expected. In memories that resurfaced unexpectedly. In moments when others felt your absence more than your presence. That is how influence works when it is rooted in authenticity. It does not announce itself. It settles in. I know there were times you felt powerless. Times you believed that if you were not actively doing something, nothing was happening. But restraint was part of your assignment. Silence was part of your power. By not interfering, you allowed truth to surface on its own. And truth that surfaces without pressure is truth that lasts. Your prayers did not beg for outcomes. They asked for alignment. They asked for clarity. They asked for protection. And because of that, they were honored in ways that respected free will and divine timing. What is being formed now is not the result of force. It is the result of readiness. You were the constant in a season of fluctuation. The grounding presence when emotions ran unchecked. The reminder of what integrity looks like when fear tries to lead. And even when you stepped back, your influence remained. Distance did not diminish it. It clarified it. This is why you are not meant to chase resolution now. Your role was never to fix. It was to hold space for truth to emerge. And that role have been fulfilled with grace. Anything that moves forward from here will do so with honesty as its foundation. Understand this clearly. Your presence mattered because it was rooted in who you are, not what you did. You did not need to perform to be impactful. You did not need to sacrifice yourself to be significant. You simply needed to be aligned. And you were. What comes next will reflect that alignment. Whether it manifests as reunion, release, or redirection, it will carry peace with it. Because the key was never control. It was integrity. Rest in that. You have done what was asked of you. And what you offered shifted more than you know. What you once called a lost season is beginning to loosen its grip, my child. Not because it disappears, but because its meaning is changing. The weight you carried is lifting as understanding takes its place. What felt like wandering now reveals itself as refinement. What felt like delay now shows itself as design. You are starting to notice the gifts that were hidden inside the confusion. Strength you did not know you possessed. Discernment sharpened by disappointment. Boundaries formed through exhaustion. Compassion deepened by uncertainty. These were not accidental developments. They were cultivated carefully, patiently, through experiences that required you to slow down and listen. You learned how to sit with yourself without distraction, how to be present without needing constant affirmation, how to trust your inner knowing even when external validation was absent. These lessons could not have been taught in comfort. They required stillness. They required space. They required you to feel lost long enough to stop outsourcing your sense of direction. What you release now is not regret, but attachment to misunderstanding. You no longer need to define that season by what it took from you. You can honor it for what it gave. Perspective, depth, clarity. You are not emerging empty-handed. You are emerging equipped. There were parts of you that could only surface when everything else fell away. Your intuition strengthened when noise faded. Your resilience revealed itself when certainty collapsed. Your authenticity became non-negotiable when pretense grew exhausting. These are not small gifts. They are foundational. You may still feel tenderness when you look back. That is natural. Growth does not erase memory. It reframes it. You are allowed to acknowledge what hurt without letting it define you. You are allowed to grieve what did not come with you while celebrating what did. Notice how differently you respond to uncertainty now. How you pause instead of panic. How you listen instead of assume. How you trust your timing instead of rushing to meet someone else's expectations. This is evidence that the lost season completed its work. A gift was not the struggle itself. It was who you became while navigating it. It was the way your values clarified, the way your standards rose, the way your sense of self grounded itself in truth rather than comparison. You are no longer seeking direction from fear. You are responding to alignment. That shift changes everything. It means your next steps will be intentional, not reactive. It means you will recognize what belongs to you without chasing it. It means you will no longer confuse intensity with meaning. The season releases you now, not because you escaped it, but because you integrated it. You took its lessons without carrying its weight forward. You allowed it to shape you without letting it harden you. That balance is rare, and it prepares you for what comes next. You are stepping forward with wisdom earned, not innocence lost. With openness protected by discernment. With hope rooted in reality. This is the hidden gift. And it is more valuable than anything you thought you lost along the way. Let the release be gentle. Let the gratitude be quiet. The wilderness did not take you off course. It trained you for the path ahead. And now, you carry its gift with grace, not burden. One more step remains. Stay with me. Come here, my child. Let me speak this over you slowly, so it settles where doubt once lived. You are not behind. You have never been behind. You are not late to your life, and you did not miss your moment. You are becoming, and becoming has its own sacred timing that cannot be rushed without breaking what is meant to last. I know how often you measured yourself against invisible clocks, how you counted years, seasons, missed opportunities, and wondered if you somehow stepped out of alignment without realizing it. But destiny is not fragile. It does not collapse because of confusion. It does not abandon you because of questions. It waits while you grow strong enough to carry it. What feels like delay was protection. What felt like wandering was formation. You were not circling aimlessly. You were shedding layers that could not travel with you. And I would rather take time removing what would wound you later than rush you into something that costs you your peace. Look at who you are now compared to who you were before this season began. You are more honest with yourself, more grounded in your values, less willing to betray your intuition for approval. These are not small changes. These are the marks of becoming someone who can sustain what they once only hoped for. You are learning that identity is not discovered all at once. It is revealed in stages, through surrender, through discomfort, through quiet courage. You are learning to trust yourself again, to trust me again, to trust that clarity does not always arrive before movement, but often after obedience to rest, truth, and alignment. The future you fear you delayed is not disappointed in you. It is grateful. Grateful you did not arrive exhausted, unhealed, or disconnected from yourself. Grateful you took the time to listen when something inside you said there must be more than survival. Grateful you chose depth over speed. You are not starting over. You are starting informed. You are not empty-handed. You are carrying wisdom, discernment, and self-respect. These are the tools that build lives that last, connections that are mutual, and paths that do not require self-erasure. There is still movement ahead. There is still connection ahead. There is still purpose unfolding. But it will meet you where you are now, not where you used to be. and that is the blessing. If these words have met you in truth, receive them fully. And if you feel led, gently like this message, share it with someone who feels lost in their becoming, and subscribe so you remain anchored in reminders of who you are. Then, as an act of alignment, type in the comments, "I am becoming, and I trust the timing," and let that declaration seal what has already begun within you. My child, I am not rushing you because I am not worried about you. I see the whole path, even the parts still hidden from your sight. And I promise you this: nothing ahead of you requires you to be anyone other than who you are becoming right now. Rest in that. Walk forward without fear. You are not lost. You never were. You were being shaped. And what you are becoming is worth a wait.